TTIP is a new generation trade agreement. It's an agreement that aims at ensuring the free movement of factors of productions and facilitate trade across the Atlantic. If you think about the size of the economy of the European Union and US, together they make almost 50% of GDP. So you can imagine how significant this agreement can be should it go through. And the trade which is exchanged between Europe and the US is around 1/3 of the global one. And this makes you understand why TTIP today represents a new forms of economic governance well beyond the trade agreement. TTIP raises in its own ambitions a constitutional problem. How can countries around the world decide to shape their policies by taking into account not only the concerns of their own people, but also the people sitting and living in another jurisdiction? And this is something new, something that didn't exist before. And this explains the concern felt and voiced by civil society about not being part of the process of the negotiation and questioning how their life could change in the future. And this led to a transparency debate. Trade negotiations over the last few decades have always been taking place in sort of black boxes, hidden from public scrutiny. But now, because of the nature of those agreements, there's an increasing interest to know more. And this is certainly a positive development from a society perspective and also from a civic engagement perspective, but is extremely difficult for all of us, in particular from the journalists, to tell and explain what TTIP is about and how these may affect people and citizens' life. The major concern raised by TTIP today is the so-called race to the bottom. The fact that by the only idea of establishing this kind of cooperation between US and European regulators, there might be a sort of hidden incentive for the regulators to actually reduce the level of protection. And I think this is a legitimate concern. We need to try to think what is going to happen once the agreement will be put in place. But overall, I think it's important to understand that it is only when an agreement is going to be reached sector by sector, an organic apple in the US is going to be equivalent to an organic apple in Europe, that we might judge the possible consequences on the level of protection within the framework of the agreement. TTIP is not only a trade agreement, but it also has an investment chapter. And the idea is to promote mutual investment between the European Union and the US. And when an investment agreement is concluded, the aim is to ensure protection for the investor. And according to the so-called ISDS system, which is an instrument of public international law, it is possible for an investor whose investment is or can be put at stake by the exercise also of regulatory autonomy, that means by the adoption of a new policy, to question that in front of a dispute settlement system, usually arbitrators, who have to decide whether this change in policy might actually affect the investment and therefore the legitimate expectation of that investor. Today, extending ISDS in the relationship among countries which are so economically developed raises questions which have to be taken into serious account, and that's why the European Commission decided to put forward a new proposal which substantially maintained the nature of ISDS but tried to address some of the concerns which were raised by civil society by making more permanent and by creating an appeal system into the ISDS system. It is extremely difficult to imagine the future of TTIP at the moment, in this historical moment. We are 3 years through the negotiations. We see some European leaders turning their back to the original mandate, which was given unanimously to the European Commission. And this has led the President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, to ask the European leaders to possibly confirm their political desire to continue the negotiation. So we are really in an historical moment because it is the moment in which we still have the negotiators working very hard by the end of 2016 to possibly consolidate a text. Should it not be the case, there will probably be an impasse, a political impasse of a couple of years. And we still don't know how and whether this will be taken over by the new president of the United States and the new administration. Being someone who has been working for more than a decade about the US-EU relationship, I cannot but being optimistic. I think over time we're going to make progress, because this is not only a geopolitical challenge, but it's also a cultural challenge. I think if you think and you consider that 90% of the economic growth is going to occur outside of Europe in a few years' time, it is pretty clear that Europe and the US have an economic case to work together. But it's not only the economic case, it's also the social case. The fact that we have to get to know each other better, because we are kind of homogeneous as a society who can work together.